What would you do if the woman sleeping with your husband called you a servant in front of your entire family in the Silicon Valley elite? Tonight, a quiet wife with a dangerous secret faces the most public humiliation of her life. But before the night is over, a dying patriarch will make one choice that flips the entire power game on its head. This isn't just scandal. It's a map of hidden bank accounts, a judge with debts, a daughter live streaming the truth, and a billionaire's final confession that detonates a dynasty. A marriage built on manipulation, a legacy built on lies, and a question no one sees coming. Who really owns the future of the Hamilton empire? Stay with me, because the moment the father-in-law takes the mic, everything you think you know will change. If this story grabs you, please like the video, comment your thoughts, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel for more jaw-dropping, true-to-life dramas. Your support keeps these stories coming. The morning sun cast golden rays across the Hamilton estate in Marin County, illuminating the marble fountains and manicured hedges that had witnessed 50 years of triumphs and secrets. Sarah Hamilton stood on the terrace, her tablet balanced in one hand, while the other unconsciously protected her stomach. 3 months pregnant, though no one knew yet, today was supposed to be perfect. Today, at Marcus Sr.'s 50th company anniversary celebration, she would finally share the news that would complete their family. "Mrs. Hamilton," called Maria, the head of catering, "should we set up the champagne fountain on the east lawn or near the gazebo?" Sarah smiled, her practiced hostess demeanor never wavering. "Near the gazebo, Maria. Mr. Hamilton Sr. loves watching the sunset from there." As Maria hurried away, Sarah allowed herself a moment to glance at the ultrasound photo hidden in her portfolio. Baby number 3. After Rachel and Alex, she'd thought their family was complete. But this little surprise had filled her with unexpected joy. Derek would be thrilled. Or so she hoped. Her phone buzzed with a notification from her anonymous blog, The Real Trophy Wife. 2 million followers and climbing. None of them knew that the woman teaching them financial independence was living in a golden cage. Her own accounts merely an allowance from her husband's empire. The irony wasn't lost on her. From his study window, Marcus Hamilton Sr. watched his daughter-in-law orchestrate the preparations with military precision. At 72, confined to a wheelchair by the cancer eating away at his body, he had little left but observations and regrets. His gnarled hand clutched a faded photograph of his late wife, Elena. "She's just like you," he whispered to the image. "Too good for this family." The estate hummed with activity as 200 of Silicon Valley's elite prepared to celebrate the Hamilton legacy. Caterers arranged elaborate displays, florists positioned towering arrangements of white orchids, and a string quartet tuned their instruments in the foyer. Sarah moved through it all like a conductor leading a symphony, each gesture precise, each decision final. She didn't notice her husband's car pulling into the circular drive 2 hours early. Didn't see him exit with a woman who wasn't his wife. Didn't observe how he held the car door for her, his hand lingering on the small of her back. By 6 o'clock, the transformation was complete. The Hamilton estate glowed with understated elegance, every detail a testament to old money refined by new technology. Sarah stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the sapphire earrings Marcus Sr. had given her 5 years ago. "You look beautiful, Mom," Rachel said from the doorway. At 16, she had inherited Sarah's grace and her father's sharp intelligence. "Dad's going to flip when you tell him about the baby." Sarah's hand flew to her stomach. "How did you— Please, you've been glowing for weeks and you keep refusing wine at dinner." Rachel's smile dimmed slightly. "He will be happy, right?" "Of course, sweetheart. Your father loves our family." The lie tasted bitter, but what else could she tell her daughter? That Derek hadn't touched her in months? That his late nights at the office had nothing to do with quarterly reports? As guests began arriving, Sarah took her position in the foyer, greeting each with personalized warmth. The mayor's wife got compliments on her new charity initiative. The Stanford dean heard praise for the new engineering program. Each interaction was flawless, filed away in her mental database of connections and obligations. "Sarah, darling," Vivian Blackwood air-kissed both cheeks. "The estate looks absolutely divine. You must give me your florist's number." "Thank you, Vivian. I'll have Maria send you the details." Behind her practiced smile, Sarah's mind wandered to the conversation she'd have with Derek. She'd pull him aside after Marcus Sr.'s toast, share the ultrasound photo, watch his face transform with joy. Maybe this baby would bridge the growing distance between them. Marcus Sr. made his entrance at 7 sharp, his wheelchair guided by his faithful nurse Robert. Even diminished by illness, he commanded the room. Conversations quieted as he passed, respect and fear mingling in equal measure. This was the man who'd built Hamilton Tech from a garage startup into a $30 billion empire. "Sarah," he said quietly as she bent to kiss his cheek, "you've outdone yourself. It's your night, Marcus. You deserve perfection." His eyes, still sharp despite the pain medication, studied her face. "Perfection is an illusion, my dear. But the effort, that's what matters." She squeezed his shoulder, feeling the bones beneath his expensive suit. 6 months, the doctors had said, maybe 8 if he was lucky. The thought of losing the only person in this family who truly saw her made her throat tight. "Has Derek arrived?" Marcus asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "He must be running late from the office. You know how he is about these quarterly projections." Marcus's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "Yes, I know exactly how he is." The party swelled around them, conversations flowing as freely as the champagne. Tech titans discussed IPOs while their wives compared vacation homes. It was the same dance Sarah had perfected over 10 years of marriage, each step memorized until she could perform it in her sleep. At 7:45, she felt the crowd's energy shift. A hush rippled through the ballroom like a stone dropped in still water. Sarah turned, her hostess smile ready, and felt the expression freeze on her face. Derek had arrived. He strode through the entrance with the confidence of a man who'd never been denied anything. At 42, he still cut an impressive figure in his tailored tuxedo. But it wasn't Derek that caused the whispers and stares. It was the woman on his arm. Victoria Cross wore a blood-red dress that seemed designed to offend every rule of appropriate evening wear. Cut dangerously low in front and scandalously high on her thighs, it screamed for attention in a room that whispered. Her diamonds were larger than Sarah's, her laugh louder, her grip on Derek's arm possessive. "Everyone," Derek announced it, his voice carrying across the stunned silence, "I'd like you to meet Victoria Cross, our new Director of Strategic Initiatives." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't just another mistress hidden in hotel rooms and business trips. This was a declaration of war in her own home, at his father's celebration, in front of everyone who mattered. She forced her feet to move, her smile to remain steady. "Derek, you made it." His eyes slid past her like she was furniture. Of course, wouldn't miss Dad's big night. Victoria's crimson lips curved in a smile sharp as broken glass. "Sarah, isn't it? Derek's told me so much about you." The emphasis on so much carried a weight that made Sarah's stomach turn. This woman knew intimate details of her life, her marriage, her home. The violation of it threatened to buckle her knees. "I need to speak with you," Sarah whispered to Derek. "Privately. It's important." "Later," he said dismissively, already turning away. "Victoria, let me introduce you to the Blackwoods." Sarah stood frozen as her husband paraded his mistress through her party, in her home, past the photographs of their children on the mantel. Each introduction was another nail in the coffin of their marriage, hammered home with brutal efficiency. But the killing blow was yet to come. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for a glass of water from a passing server. The ultrasound photo in her clutch seemed to burn through the silk fabric. Around her, the party continued its dizzy swirl, but the whispers had taken on a different quality. She caught fragments of conversation. "Can you believe he brought her here?" Poor Sarah. In front of his sick father. Sympathy was almost worse than the scandal. Sarah straightened her spine, a lifetime of finishing school posture coming to her rescue. She would not crumble. Not here. Not in front of them. "Sarah, dear," Margaret Worthington, the governor's wife, touched her elbow gently. "If you need a moment." "I'm fine, Margaret. Thank you." The words came automatically, her hostess programming overriding her human despair. "Have you tried the canapes?" The chef outdid himself with the lobster thermidor. She moved through the crowd like a ghost at her own funeral, ensuring glasses were filled, conversations flowing. the party machinery running smoothly. All while her husband's mistress occupied the space where she should have been, at Derek's side, charming the people Sarah had cultivated for a decade. Marcus Sr. observed it all from his wheelchair, his face a mask of controlled fury. When Sarah passed, he caught her hand. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "After tonight." She nodded, not trusting her voice. His squeeze was gentle but firm, a lifeline in the storm. "Mrs. Hamilton?" Maria appeared at her side. "We're ready for the toast." The toast, Marcus Sr.'s speech, the moment when the patriarch would pass the torch to his son, acknowledging Derek as his successor. Sarah's stomach churned as she watched Derek position himself near his father, Victoria still attached to his arm like a parasitic vine. The lights dimmed slightly, and Marcus Sr. was wheeled to the microphone. The crowd fell silent, 200 of the most powerful people in California hanging on the words of a dying man. 50 years ago, Marcus began, his voice still strong despite his frailty. "I started Hamilton Tech in a garage with nothing but an idea and stubbornness that my dear wife Elena called pig-headed ambition." Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah had heard this story before, but tonight it felt different. There was an edge to Marcus's delivery, a weight to his pauses. "Elena was the heart of this company. She reminded me daily that success without character is merely failure dressed in expensive clothes." His eyes found Derek in the crowd, a lesson some learned too late. Derek's smile faltered slightly. Victoria whispered something in his ear. "Tonight, as I look at what we've built, I'm reminded that legacy isn't about blood or birthrights." Marcus's gaze shifted to Sarah. "It's about who shows up, who does the work, who honors the responsibilities that others shirk." The crowd murmured, sensing undercurrents they couldn't quite identify. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. Was Marcus about to— "A toast," Marcus raised his water glass, "to those who serve with grace when others would command with cruelty." Glasses rose throughout the room, but the confusion was palpable. This wasn't the succession speech they'd expected. Derek's face had gone from confused to angry, his jaw clenched. As the crowd drank, Sarah made her decision. She couldn't let this night, Marcus's night, be ruined by Derek's choices. She moved toward them, the ultrasound photo clutched in her hand. She would tell Derek about the baby, remind him of what truly mattered, salvage something from this wreckage. "Derek," she said, reaching for his elbow. "Please, 5 minutes. It's about our family." He jerked away from her touch as if burned. "Not now, Sarah. Can't you see I'm working?" "Working?" The word escaped before she could stop it. "Is that what you call this?" Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking crystal. "Oh my, is the little wife jealous?" She turned to Derek with mock concern. "You did tell me she could be possessive, was—" "I'm his wife," Sarah said quietly, "the mother of his children." "Yes, Derek mentioned it. You run a lovely household." Victoria's smile was pure poison. "Someone has to manage the staff, I suppose." The words hit like physical blows, but Sarah held her ground. Around them, guests pretended not to watch while hanging on every word. "Derek," Sarah tried once more, extending the ultrasound toward him. "Please, just look at this." "Could you fetch more champagne?" Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through Sarah's plea. "Like a good little servant? That's what Derek says you're best at." The ballroom erupted in gasps. Phones appeared in hands, capturing the moment for posterity. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet, years of careful dignity crumbling in an instant. "Victoria." Derek's voice held a warning, but it was too late. Sarah's body betrayed her. The shock, the humiliation, the months of stress, it all crashed together. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her stomach as a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. The ultrasound photo fluttered to the marble floor. "Oh God," she whispered, feeling warmth between her legs. Looking down, she saw crimson blooming across her designer gown. "Someone call 911!" Rachel's scream cut through the party noise. "Mom! Mom!" Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed to the cold marble, her dress spreading around her like spilled wine. Through the chaos of voices and movement, she heard Derek's voice, cold and businesslike. "Someone get her out of here. She's ruining the party." Boom, then darkness claimed her, merciful and complete. Marcus Sr.'s voice rose above the pandemonium. Get my daughter-in-law to the hospital now. His wheelchair surged forward, nearly running over Victoria's designer shoes. And you, he pointed at Derek with a shaking finger, are no son of mine. The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and terror. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the paramedics' urgent voices and the wail of sirens. Her hand clutched her stomach, as if she could hold the life inside through sheer will. Please, she whispered to the young EMT adjusting her IV. Save my baby. We're doing everything we can, ma'am. Just stay with us. At Marin General, they rushed her straight to surgery. The last thing she saw before the anesthesia claimed her was the concerned face of Dr. James Wright, her OB-GYN. We're going to fight for both of you, he promised. Hours later, Sarah woke to the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell of hospital. Her mouth was dry as sand, her body aching. But the first thing she did was reach for her stomach. Still there, still pregnant. Thank God, she breathed. It was close. Marcus Sr.'s voice came from beside her bed. He was slumped in his wheelchair, looking every one of his 72 years. But you're both fighters. How long? 8 hours. Rachel and Alex are in the waiting room. I wouldn't let them wake you. His eyes were red-rimmed. Sarah, what happened tonight? Elena experienced something similar 30 years ago. Sarah turned to look at him, seeing new pain in his weathered face. My business partner called her the hired help at a charity function. I laughed. God help me, I laughed to keep the peace. His voice broke. She never forgot, never fully forgave. When she died, the last thing she said was that she hoped I'd learn the difference between a wife and a servant. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. Derek didn't come, did he? No, Hen. Marcus's jaw tightened. He stayed at the party, with her. But I need you to know something, Sarah. This ends now. Tonight changed everything. A knock interrupted them. Dr. Wright entered, followed by a woman in a severe business suit. Mrs. Hamilton, I'm sorry to intrude, but there's been a development. Dr. Wright looked uncomfortable. This is Joyce Reynolds from Hospital Administration. There's an issue with your insurance. Joyce cleared her throat. Your coverage was terminated as of midnight last night. Your husband called to inform us that you're responsible for all charges going forward. Sarah felt the room spin. That's not possible. Additionally, Joyce continued, as if reading a death sentence, we've been instructed that any medical decisions regarding your care require Mr. Hamilton's approval. He can't do that, Marcus burst out. I'm afraid he can, Joyce replied. As the policyholder, with Mrs. Hamilton as a dependent, get out, Marcus commanded. Send all bills to me personally. Sarah Hamilton is under my protection now. After they left, Sarah broke down completely. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal, grief for more than just her marriage. I was going to tell him about the baby, she whispered. I thought it would fix things. Marcus reached for her hand. Some things can't be fixed, my dear. Only survived, and then transformed. Sarah Hamilton had hit her first rock bottom. She just didn't know how much further she had to fall. 2 weeks had passed since the party that destroyed Sarah Hamilton's life. She sat propped in her hospital bed, the walls of her private room, paid for by Marcus Sr., covered in get-well cards from everyone except her husband. The irony wasn't lost on her that strangers showed more concern than the man who'd vowed to love her in sickness and health. You need to see this, her lawyer, Patricia Stone, said as she entered with a thick folder. Patricia was Marcus's personal attorney, sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous in court. Derek's been busy. Sarah's hand went protectively to her stomach, where her baby still clung to life despite the odds. What now? Patricia spread documents across the bedside table. He's filing for divorce on grounds of infidelity. What? Sarah's monitor beeped as her heart rate spiked. That's insane. He's the one who, according to these affidavits, you've been having an affair with Dr. Wright for 6 months. Patricia's expression was grim. Derek has hotel receipts, credit card statements, even photos of you entering and leaving medical buildings. Sarah grabbed the papers, scanning them with growing horror. There was her signature on hotel registries she'd never signed, her car in parking lots she'd never visited. These are my prenatal appointments, she said, pointing to one photo. Every hotel visit corresponds to an OB appointment. He's using my pregnancy against me. It gets worse. Patricia pulled out another document. This is from 2 years ago. A psychiatric evaluation expressing concern about your erratic behavior and potential danger to yourself and others. Sarah read the therapist's report, her blood running cold. It was her voice, her words, but twisted into something unrecognizable. Sessions where she'd discussed normal marital stress had been edited to suggest paranoia and instability. I remember this appointment, she whispered. I was talking about feeling overwhelmed planning Rachel's sweet 16 while managing the foundation gala. How is this possible? Deepfake technology has gotten sophisticated, Patricia explained. But there's more. 6 months ago, someone filed a CPS report claiming you left Alex home alone overnight while intoxicated. I was at a medical conference in Boston. Derek knew that. He approved the trip. The report was dismissed, but it's still in the system. Sarah, he's been building a case against you for years. This isn't a sudden decision. The door opened and Marcus Sr. wheeled himself in, followed by his nurse. Despite his own deteriorating health, he'd been at the hospital daily. How is she? He asked Patricia. Discovering the depth of your son's betrayal, Patricia replied. Marcus's face darkened. He's no son of mine. Not anymore. He turned to Sarah. I've been doing my own investigation. Did you know Derek transferred all your joint assets to offshore accounts 6 months ago? Sarah felt numb. Our savings? The children's college funds? Everything. Legally, you have access to exactly nothing. Your credit cards, your checking account, all frozen. But I have my blog income, Patricia shook her head, filed under the family LLC which Derek controls. According to California community property law, since you are married, he has claim to all earnings. Sarah slumped back against the pillows. Every avenue of escape had been systematically closed before she even knew she was trapped. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. I had my team pull Derek's phone records. He's been in communication with Judge Patricia Stone. She's been assigned to your divorce case. Can we prove bias? Stone's been careful, but she has a gambling problem, and Derek's been seen at the same poker games. Marcus pulled out his own phone showing security footage. This is from last month. Notice the chips Derek slides across when he leaves the table? Stone pockets them moments later. A knock interrupted them. Dr. Wright entered, looking haggard. Sarah, I'm sorry, but I need to speak with you about your care going forward. If this is about payment, Marcus began, it's not that. Dr. Wright closed the door carefully. I've been served with a restraining order. Derek Hamilton is claiming I have been stalking his wife, using medical appointments as a pretense for an affair. My lawyer says if I continue treating you, I could lose my license. Sarah felt the walls closing in. He's isolating me from my own doctor? I'm transferring you to Dermadrison. She's excellent, and more importantly, she has no connection to Derek. He paused at the door. Sarah, I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. Please be careful. After he left, the three sat in heavy silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. He's going to take my children. No, Marcus said firmly. I won't let that happen. How can you stop him? He's thought of everything. I'm a pregnant woman with no money, no home, no credibility, and a paper trail suggesting I'm an unstable, unfaithful mother. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I can't even fight back. Yes, you can. Patricia leaned forward. Marcus has a plan. The old man's eyes glinted with something Sarah had seen in boardrooms but never directed at family. Derek thinks he's won because he's been playing chess while you've been playing house, but he's forgotten who taught him the game. What do you mean? Marcus pulled out a folder marked confidential in red letters. 5 years ago, I restructured Hamilton Tech's intellectual property holdings. Every patent, every innovation from the past 5 years was filed under a shadow company. I don't understand. The CEO of that company? The person who's been signing off on every major development? Marcus smiled coldly. Is the anonymous owner of the Real Trophy Wife blog, you, Sarah. You've been running a multi-billion-dollar IP portfolio without knowing it. Sarah's mind reeled. But how? Your blog isn't just a blog. I've been using it as a testing ground for our fintech innovations. every financial tool you've reviewed, every investment strategy you've shared. They were Hamilton Tech products in beta. Your 2 million followers have been our focus group. Derek doesn't know? Derek sees what he wants to see, a housewife with a hobby. Marcus's expression softened. But I see what Elena saw in me all those years ago, potential waiting for the right moment to bloom. Patricia added, this gives us leverage, but we need to be strategic. Derek has the current assets and the court's ear. We have to play a longer game. How long? Sarah asked, thinking of her baby, of Rachel and Alex. As long as it takes, Marcus replied. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. I own a small apartment downtown off the books. It's not the estate, but... It's perfect, Sarah interrupted. Thank you. As they prepared to leave, Sarah caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked hollow, defeated. But in her eyes, something new flickered. Not hope, not yet, but determination. Derek had documented everything, built an airtight case against her. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated her. And more importantly, he'd underestimated his father. Marcus, she said as they wheeled her to discharge. That comment at the party about legacy not being about blood, you meant it, didn't you? The old man reached for her hand. Every word. Derek may have my DNA, but you, Sarah, you have Elena's spirit, and that's worth more than all the blood in the world. Outside the hospital, reporters had gathered, tipped off by someone about the Hamilton divorce. Cameras flashed as they emerged. Sarah, is it true you're having an affair? Will you fight for custody? What about the baby? Sarah kept her head high, saying nothing, but as they helped her into the waiting car, she heard Victoria's voice from across the parking lot. Such a shame, Victoria said loudly to her companion, ensuring the reporters heard. Mental illness can destroy even the best families. Derek's being so strong through all this. Sarah's hand clenched. The woman who'd called her a servant was now painting her as insane. The documentation was just beginning, but so was Sarah's education and survival. The custody hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in September, exactly 2 months after the party that changed everything. Sarah stood before the mirror in Marcus's downtown apartment, adjusting the conservative navy suit Patricia had selected. At 5 months pregnant, she could no longer hide her condition, but Patricia said that might work in their favor. Judges typically favor keeping children with pregnant mothers, Patricia had explained. It shows stability, continuity. Sarah wasn't so sure. Nothing about her life felt stable anymore. Ready? Marcus asked from the doorway. Despite his own chemotherapy schedule, he'd insisted on accompanying her to court, as ready as someone can be to fight for their children. She touched her belly, where the baby had been active all morning. Marcus, if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. We have truth on our side. But as they entered the courthouse, Sarah's heart sank. The reporter pool was massive, cameras tracking their every move. Someone had leaked the hearing date. Sarah, how do you respond to allegations of child endangerment? Is it true you're bipolar? Who's the real father of your baby? Patricia formed a protective shell, guiding them through the chaos. No comments. Move aside, please. Inside the courtroom, Sarah's worst fears materialized. Sitting at the judge's bench was Patricia Stone, the woman from Marcus's surveillance footage, the same woman who had taken Derek's poker chips. Your Honor, Patricia Stone stood immediately. We move for recusal based on potential bias. Motion denied, Judge Stone cut her off. I've reviewed the brief. Unless you have concrete evidence of impropriety, we'll proceed. Sarah felt Marcus's hand tighten on her shoulder. They both knew the evidence they had wasn't enough. Not yet. Derek entered with his legal team, Victoria conspicuously absent. He wore a charcoal suit and an expression of wounded dignity. Their eyes met briefly across the courtroom. For a moment, Sarah saw a flicker of something. Regret? Shame? Before his lawyer whispered in his ear and his face hardened again. We're here to determine temporary custody of the minor children, Rachel and Alexander Hamilton. Judge Stone began. Mr. Hamilton, you may present your case. Derek's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, stood. He was known for destroying reputations with surgical precision. Your Honor will demonstrate that Mrs. Hamilton presents a clear and present danger to her children's well-being. He clicked a remote, and a screen displayed what appeared to be therapy session transcripts. These sessions, recorded by Dr. Patricia Morse, show a pattern of erratic behavior, paranoid delusions, and potential violence. Sarah listened in horror as they played edited audio clips. Her voice, discussing normal parental frustrations, had been spliced to sound unhinged. A comment about being so stressed I could scream became so stressed I could harm someone. Her discussion of Derek's long work hours became paranoid rants about abandonment. Furthermore, Thorne continued, Mrs. Hamilton has been conducting an extramarital affair while pregnant, showing a complete disregard for family values and stability. The hotel records appeared on screen. Each one corresponded to her prenatal appointments, but stripped of context, they painted a damning picture. Objection, Patricia Stone stood. These documents have been manipulated. Do you have proof of tampering? Judge Stone asked, knowing full well they didn't. Not admissible proof. We're gathering forensic evidence. Then we'll revisit when you have it. Continue, Mr. Thorne. Sarah watched Derek throughout the presentation. He sat perfectly still, occasionally shaking his head with practiced sorrow. This man who'd shared her bed for 12 years had become a stranger capable of casual cruelty. We also have this, Thorne produced a folder. A CPS report from 6 months ago, which was dismissed, Patricia interrupted, but which shows a pattern of concerning behavior. Your Honor, the children themselves have expressed concern. Sarah's heart stopped. No, they wouldn't use Rachel and Alex against her. A video played, Rachel looking uncomfortable in what appeared to be Derek's home office, speaking to someone off camera. Mom's been different lately, stressed. She forgot to pick me up from practice twice last month. Sarah wanted to scream. She'd been at the hospital those days, getting tested for the high-risk pregnancy. Derek had promised to get Rachel. Alex appeared next. She's always tired, always sick. It's been hard. Of course it had been hard. She'd been hiding morning sickness while managing a household and discovering her husband's affair. But context meant nothing here. Your Honor, Thorne concluded, we request full temporary custody be awarded to Mr. Hamilton with supervised visitation for Mrs. Hamilton pending psychological evaluation. It was Patricia's turn. She presented Sarah's spotless record as a mother, her community involvement, testimonials from teachers and coaches. But against Derek's orchestrated evidence, it felt like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Mrs. Hamilton, Judge Stone finally addressed her directly. Do you have anything to say? Sarah stood on shaking legs. Your Honor, I love my children more than life itself, everything I've done, including the affair. Judge Stone's voice was sharp. There was no affair. Those were prenatal appointments, which you attended alone, secretly, paying cash. Sarah faltered. Put that way, even the truth sounded like a lie. Your Honor, Marcus Sr. spoke up from the gallery. If I may. You may not, Judge Stone snapped. Sit down, Mr. Hamilton, or be removed. Sarah saw Marcus's face purple with rage, but he complied. They were trapped in a rigged game. I've heard enough, Judge Stone declared. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting temporary full custody to Mr. Hamilton. Mrs. Hamilton will have supervised visitation, 2 hours twice weekly, pending completion of a court-ordered psychological evaluation. The gavel fell like a guillotine. No, the word tore from Sarah's throat. You can't take my children? Rachel, Alex. But her teenagers weren't in the courtroom. Derek had made sure of that. Additionally, Judge Stone continued, due to the instability demonstrated here today, Mrs. Hamilton is ordered to remain at least 100 yards from the family residence and the children's schools unless during approved visitation. Sarah collapsed into her chair. She couldn't even drive her children to school, couldn't tuck them in at night, couldn't be there when they needed her. This is temporary, Patricia whispered urgently. We'll appeal. But Sarah wasn't listening. She was watching Derek gather his papers, his face a mask of false concern. He paused at their table. It's for the best, Sarah, he said quietly. Get help, for the children's sake. The hypocrisy of it, the man who'd paraded his mistress through their home lecturing her about the children's welfare, sparked something in Sarah. You won't get away with this, she said, her voice steady despite her tears. Derek's mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. I already have. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy had intensified. Someone had leaked the verdict. Sarah tried to shield her face as Patricia guided her to the car, but the cameras caught everything. Her tears, her swollen belly, her complete devastation. The headlines were already writing themselves. Hamilton heiress loses custody battle, and tech dynasty torn apart by scandal. Back at the apartment, Sarah sat numbly as Marcus raged. Stone is corrupt. The whole system is... He broke off, coughing violently. The cancer was getting worse. Marcus, please, your health. Damn my health. But he sank into his wheelchair, exhausted. Elena would never forgive me for letting this happen. This isn't your fault, Sarah said. You tried to warn me years ago. I believed in the fairy tale. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She opened it to find a video link. It was Victoria's Instagram story. She was redecorating Rachel's room, painting over the mural Sarah and her daughter had created together when Rachel was 10. The caption read, "Making a fresh start for our new family." Our new family. Sarah ran to the bathroom and vomited until nothing was left but bile and rage. When she emerged, Patricia was waiting with papers. You need to see this. Derek's already filed to make the custody permanent. And Sarah, there's more. He's petitioning to have you declared unfit before the baby's born. He wants full custody of that child too. Sarah's hand flew to her belly. He can't. He can't take a baby that isn't even... She stopped. Patricia's face told her everything. He could, and he would, unless she found a way to fight back. Patricia, Sarah said, her voice hoarse but determined. I want to see everything Marcus has on the shadow company. Every document, every patent, every connection to my blog. Patricia and Marcus exchanged glances. Sarah, Marcus said carefully, that's a long game. The children need a mother who isn't broken, who isn't defeated. Sarah stood, squaring her shoulders. Derek's documented everything? Fine. So will I. Every move he makes, every lie he tells, every person he corrupts. That could take months, years even. Sarah touched her belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. Then I'd better get started. The first catastrophe had struck. Sarah Hamilton had lost her children. But in that loss, something new was born. Not hope, not yet, but something harder, sharper. The will to survive. The eviction notice arrived on a Thursday, just 3 days after the custody hearing. Sarah stared at the paper taped to Marcus's apartment door, her supervised visitation ban still chafing her wrist from that morning's 2 hours with Rachel and Alex. 24 hours to vacate, she read aloud to Patricia over the phone. How is this possible? Marcus owns this apartment. Actually, Patricia's voice was grim. He doesn't. I just discovered the property was transferred to Hamilton Tech's Real Estate Holdings last year as part of a tax restructuring. And as CEO, Derek controls it. Sarah finished, her free hand protectively covering her belly. Of course he does. She thought of the morning's visitation, held in a sterile government building under the watchful eye of a social worker. Rachel had been distant, confused. Alex refused to make eye contact. They'd both been coached, she could tell, trained to see her as the enemy of their family's stability. Mom, why did you do it? Rachel had asked, her 16-year-old face twisted with pain. Dad showed us the receipts, the hotel records. How could you? Sarah had wanted to scream the truth, but the social worker's presence kept her silent. Any disparagement of Derek could end her visitations entirely. Now she had nowhere to go. Pack what you can, Patricia advised. I'll try to get an emergency injunction. Don't, Sarah surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. He wants me to fight this in court. Every filing costs money I don't have and makes me look more unstable. Then where will you go? Sarah looked around the apartment that had been her refuge. Her clothes hung in the closet, her prenatal vitamins sat on the counter, her laptop, her only connection to her blog followers, lay on the desk. I'll figure it out. But as the hours ticked by, the reality of her situation crystallized. Derek's legal team had sent letters to everyone in her contact list, warning them about potential liability if they harbored someone under psychological evaluation. Her parents, living on a fixed retirement income, couldn't risk their future. Her college friends had families of their own to protect. Even the women's shelters had received notices about accepting someone with an ongoing custody dispute. By evening, Sarah sat in her car outside the apartment building, her possessions reduced to 2 suitcases and a box of legal documents. The baby moved restlessly, responding to her stress. Her phone rang. Marcus Sr. "Sarah, I just heard. This is outrageous." "Marcus, I need you to listen carefully," she interrupted. "Your nurse called earlier. You missed your chemotherapy appointment because you were trying to help me." "That's irrelevant." "It's not. You're dying, Marcus. And you're spending your last months fighting your son instead of fighting your cancer." Her voice broke. "I can't be responsible for that." "You're not responsible for any of this." "Then let me handle it. Please. Save your strength for staying alive. I'm going to need you when this is over." There was a long pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. "Where will you go?" Sarah looked at the waist gauge. Half a tank, maybe 200 miles. "I'll be okay." It was a lie they both recognized, but neither challenged. After hanging up, Sarah drove aimlessly through Marin County, past houses she'd visited for charity events, restaurants where she'd dined with Derek in happier times. Every familiar landmark was now foreign territory, forbidden to her. Finally, she pulled into a Motel 6 near the highway. The clerk looked at her designer clothes skeptically. "Cash only," he said, sliding a registration form across the stained counter. "120 a night plus deposit." Sarah counted out the bills, her emergency stash from her purse. It would last maybe a week if she was careful. After that, the room smelled of industrial disinfectant and old smoke. Sarah sat on the thin bedspread and finally allowed herself to cry. Not the pretty tears of movies, but body-shaking sobs that left her gasping. Her phone buzzed. Victoria's Instagram again. This time it was a video tour of the Hamilton estate's newly redecorated master bedroom. Their wedding photos had been removed, replaced by modern art. The antique vanity where Sarah had sat every morning was gone. "Starting fresh is so liberating," Victoria's voice chirped. "Sometimes you just have to throw out the old to make room for the new." In the background, Sarah caught a glimpse of Alex's backpack in the hallway. Her children were living with that woman, eating meals she cooked, listening to her poison dressed as sympathy. Sarah's phone rang. An unknown number, but she was desperate enough to answer. "Sarah? It's Dr. Wright. I heard what happened. I can't officially treat you, but I'm worried. When's the last time you ate a proper meal?" She tried to remember. The custody hearing had been Tuesday. Today was Thursday. Had she eaten anything but crackers from the apartment? "I'm fine," she lied. "No, you're not, and neither is your baby. There's a clinic on Riverside Drive that takes cash patients. Dr. Morrison works there on Fridays. Tell her I sent you. She'll make sure you're okay without documentation." After he hung up, Sarah realized what he meant. No insurance meant no prenatal care. No prenatal care meant risk to the baby. Risk to the baby meant more ammunition for Derek to declare her unfit. The systematic destruction of her life was surgical in its precision. Her blog notification chimed. Despite everything, her followers were growing. The post she'd scheduled weeks ago about financial independence in marriage had gone viral. 20,000 shares, 50,000 comments. Women from around the world sharing their stories of financial abuse, thanking her for the guidance. If only they knew their guru was living in a motel, counting out dollars for her next meal. But as Sarah scrolled through the comments, an idea began to form. These women trusted her. They'd built a community around shared experiences and mutual support. What if she opened her laptop and began typing? "Dear warriors," she began, using her pet name for her followers. "Today, I want to talk about what happens when the financial rug gets pulled out from under you. Not in theory, but in practice. Because warriors, I'm living it." She wrote for hours, crafting her story into something universal. No names, no specifics that could violate court orders. Just the raw truth of a woman whose husband had systematically stripped her of resources while she was pregnant with their child. By morning, the post had 100,000 views. The comment section exploded with support, advice, and similar stories. Women offered couches to crash on, lawyers willing to work pro bono, doctors who'd treat her off the books. But more importantly, the ad revenue from the viral post would keep her in the motel for another month. Sarah's phone rang as dawn broke through the thin curtains. Rachel. Mom? Her daughter's voice was small, scared. I'm not supposed to call you, but something's wrong. Sarah's heart seized. What is it, baby? Dad and Victoria had a huge fight last night. She threw a glass at him. And Mom, I think she's pregnant too. The world tilted. Victoria was pregnant. Of course she was. Are you safe? Sarah asked, forcing her voice to stay calm. Yeah, we're at school now, but Mom, I know you didn't do what Dad says. I heard him talking to his lawyer. I heard him say, the line went dead. Sarah immediately called back. The number was blocked. She tried Patricia, but got voicemail. Then the social services supervisor, also voicemail. By noon, a new court order arrived via process server at the motel. Her visitation was suspended pending investigation of attempted parental alienation via unauthorized contact. Rachel's 2-minute phone call had cost Sarah her last connection to her children. That night, alone in the motel room, Sarah felt the baby kick strongly, a reminder that one child still depended on her. One child Derek hadn't gotten his hands on. I won't let him have you, she whispered to her belly. I promise. But even as she made the vow, she knew the systematic destruction was far from over. Derek had taken her home, her money, her reputation, and her children. What else was left to lose? She would find out soon enough. The contractions started at 2 in the morning in a Motel 6 bathroom that had seen better decades. Sarah gripped the cracked sink, her body seized by a pain that radiated from her spine to her soul. She was only 32 weeks. Too early. Too alone. Her phone sat on the counter, screen cracked from when she dropped it running from process servers the day before. 3 contacts stared back at her. Emergency Services, Patricia Stone, and Marcus Sr. The emergency room would mean paperwork, insurance questions, Derek being notified as her legal husband. Patricia was in court. Marcus was undergoing treatment. Another contraction ripped through her. The baby was coming whether she had help or not. 911, what's your emergency? I'm in premature labor. 32 weeks, Motel 6 on Riverside Drive, room 237. She gasped as another wave hit. Please hurry. The EMTs found her on the bathroom floor, blood pooling beneath her. They worked with efficient urgency, their faces professionally blank at the squalor surrounding their patient. The designer clothes piled in corners, the legal documents scattered across the bed, the laptop still glowing with her latest blog post about surviving day by day. Ma'am, is there someone we should call? Your husband? No, Sarah managed through gritted teeth. No husband. At the hospital, nurses prepped her for emergency delivery while firing questions she could barely answer. Insurance? Self-pay? Previous prenatal care? Dr. Morrison at the Riverside Clinic. Father's name for the birth certificate? Leave it blank. The judgment in their eyes was nothing compared to the terror in her heart. This baby, her last hope, was coming too soon into a world where they had nothing. Mrs. Hamilton? Dr. Morrison appeared, having been called from home. We're going to do everything we can, but I need you to fight too. Your baby needs you to fight. For 6 hours, Sarah fought, through pain that made the custody hearing seem like a paper cut, through fear that threatened to drown her, through the knowledge that somewhere across town, her other children were waking up in beds she'd tucked them into 1,000 times, now under another woman's care. At 8:47 a.m., Thomas Marcus Hamilton entered the world. 4 pounds, 2 ounces of perfect fingers and toes in his grandfather's stubborn chin. His cry was weak but insistent, a fighter's protest against arriving too soon. He's beautiful, Dr. Morrison said, placing him on Sarah's chest for a precious moment before the NICU team whisked him away. But he'll need intensive care. The next few weeks will be critical. Sarah watched through tears as they hooked her son to machines that would breathe for him, feed him, monitor every flutter of his tiny heart. The NICU bill would be astronomical, $3,000 a day, minimum, money she didn't have. Sarah? Marcus Sr.'s voice came from the doorway. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him. chemotherapy having stolen what the cancer hadn't yet claimed. I came as soon as I heard. How did you? I have my sources. He wheeled closer to the NICU window. My grandson? Thomas Marcus Hamilton, she whispered. I hope you don't mind. Tears rolled down the old man's weathered cheeks. Elena would have been so proud. She always wanted the name Thomas for a boy. He turned to her, fierce despite his frailty. Whatever he needs, whatever you need. No, Sarah's voice was stronger now. Derek's watching your every move. Any money you give me becomes evidence of manipulation. I won't let him use your kindness against Usaz. Then what will you do? The bills? I'll figure it out. And she did, in the way desperate mothers have always done. She sold her jewelry in the hospital gift shop, her engagement ring bringing $800 from a sympathetic nurse. She wrote blog posts from Thomas's bedside, turning her tragedy into content that resonated with millions. Letters from the NICU became her most read series, each post earning enough in ad revenue to buy another day of care. But Derek wasn't done. On day 3 of Thomas's life, as Sarah dozed in the uncomfortable NICU chair, Victoria Cross walked in. She wore a pristine white dress that emphasized her own pregnancy bump, her smile sharp as surgical steel. Sarah, you look tired. Get out. Sarah didn't move from Thomas's incubator. You have no right. Actually, I do. Victoria produced a document. Power of attorney for all Hamilton family medical decisions. Derek's worried about the baby. His baby. This baby isn't Derek's. Then whose is it? Your Dr. Lover's? Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. That's what everyone thinks, you know. Why else would you give birth alone in squalor while your husband maintains the family home? Sarah's hands clenched, but she kept them at her sides. Any aggression would be reported, recorded, used against her. Though I must say, Victoria continued, studying Thomas through the glass, he does look like a Hamilton. Those stubborn chins breed true. Her hand went to her own belly. Mine will have it too, the legitimate one. What do you want, Victoria? Derek sent me to make you an offer. Sign away all parental rights to all 3 children, and he'll cover the NICU bills. You can walk away clean, start over somewhere else. Maybe find a nice doctor who actually wants you. The cruelty of it, offering to save her baby's life in exchange for abandoning him, was breathtaking. Sarah stared at Thomas, so small and fragile, fighting for every breath. No. No? Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. You'd rather watch him suffer? How maternal. Get out before I call security. Victoria left, but not before taking photos of Sarah's disheveled appearance, the cramped NICU space, the evidence of poverty surrounding a Hamilton heir. That night, Rachel found a way to call again, this time from a friend's phone. Mom, I saw the news about the baby. Is he okay? Are you okay? We're fighting, sweetheart. Both of us. Dad's really mad. He and Victoria scream at each other all the time now. She's pregnant too, and he says, a muffled sound. I have to go. I love you, Mom. Alex loves you too. We know the truth. The line went dead before Sarah could respond. But those words, we know the truth, kept her warm through the long night of monitors beeping and Thomas struggling. Days blurred together. Sarah existed on hospital coffee and vending machine sandwiches, shower in the NICU parent bathroom, sleeping in waiting room chairs. Her blog followers sent what they could, $5 here, $20 there, enough to keep her fed and buy the breast pump she needed. On day 10, Thomas breathed on his own for the first time. Sarah wept with relief, then with exhaustion, then with rage at the unfairness of celebrating alone. Mrs. Hamilton? A man in an expensive suit appeared at the NICU door. I'm from Child Protective Services. We've received a complaint about an infant in danger. The bottom dropped out of Sarah's world. Again. The baby is in the NICU. How could he be in danger? The complaint alleges that you're homeless, mentally unstable, and unable to provide for the child's needs after discharge. He consulted his tablet. We'll need to do an assessment of your living situation. I'm staying at... Sarah stopped. The motel had kicked her out yesterday when her cash ran out. She'd been living in the hospital, technically trespassing. I'm between residences. His stylus clicked against the screen. Every word she spoke dug her grave deeper. I see. In finances? I'm self-employed. I run a successful blog. Monthly income? Sarah calculated desperately. The viral post had earned maybe 3,000 this month. In San Francisco, that barely covered a studio apartment. It varies, but I see. More clicking on Mrs. Hamilton. I'm concerned about your ability to provide stable housing for a medically fragile infant. We may need to consider temporary foster placement. No! The word tore from her throat, causing Thomas's monitors to spike. You can't take him. He needs me. I'm all he has. Which is precisely the problem, the man said not unkindly. A baby with his medical needs requires stable housing, consistent income, and a support system. You appear to have none of those things. He left her with forms to fill out, assessments to complete, hoops to jump through. All while her baby fought for life, and her other children lived with strangers in what used to be her home. That night, Sarah hit rock bottom. She sat in the NICU bathroom, door locked, and sobbed until nothing was left. She'd lost everything. Derek had won. The systematic destruction was complete. Her phone buzzed. Another blog notification. She almost ignored it, but habit made her look. It was a comment on her latest NICU post. From username WarriorMom1985. Sarah, you don't know me, but you saved my life 2 years ago. When you wrote about hiding money from financial abuse. I'm a lawyer now. I want to help. Check your DMs. Sarah opened her direct messages with shaking hands. There were dozens. Lawyers offering pro bono help. Doctors willing to provide free care. Women with spare rooms. Men who'd survived similar destruction. Her warriors. Her 2 million followers. They'd been watching, waiting, organizing. She wasn't alone after all. But even as hope flickered, Sarah knew the war was far from over. Derek had taken everything. Now it was her turn to take it back. 6 months had passed since Thomas's birth, and Sarah's life had found an unlikely rhythm. The one-bedroom apartment in Oakland wasn't much. Water stains on the ceiling, windows that didn't quite close. But it was theirs. The warriors from her blog had crowdfunded the deposit, and her income from sponsored posts now covered rent and Thomas's medications. The baby slept in a second-hand crib next to her bed, finally healthy enough to be home, but still requiring daily breathing treatments. Sarah had become an expert at managing his care while writing posts, conducting video conferences with her growing legal team, and documenting every interaction with Derek's camp. "Mama's got you," she whispered, administering his morning medication as dawn broke through the cracked blinds. Thomas gazed up at her with Marcus Sr.'s intelligent eyes, already showing the Hamilton stubbornness in the set of his tiny jaw. Her phone buzzed. Rachel using yet another friend's phone. "Mom, emergency. Can you meet me at Starbucks on University Ave in an hour, please? It's about Grandpa." Sarah's heart clenched. Marcus had been hospitalized again last week. His updates had grown sporadic, his voice weaker in their brief calls. "I'll be there." Getting anywhere with a 6-month-old requiring medical equipment was a production, but Sarah had it down to a science. Diaper bag with emergency supplies. Portable oxygen monitor. The baby carrier that kept Thomas close to her chest, where he thrived best. The Starbucks was in Berkeley, neutral territory where she wouldn't violate the restraining order. Sarah arrived first, choosing a corner table with clear sightlines. Old habits from the custody battle died hard. Rachel appeared 10 minutes later, and Sarah's breath caught. Her daughter had grown 3 inches and lost the baby fat from her cheeks. At almost 17, she looked like Sarah had in college. Before Derek, before the fairy tale turned nightmare. "Mom," Rachel's voice broke as she slid into the opposite chair. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For believing Dad's lies. For not fighting harder." "Baby, no." Sarah reached across the table, gripping her daughter's hands. "None of this is your fault. I have something for you." Rachel pulled out her phone, glancing nervously around the coffee shop. "From Grandpa. He made me promise to deliver it personally when things got bad." She slid the phone across the table. On the screen was a video file titled, "For Sarah, When the Time Comes." Sarah hit play with trembling fingers. Marcus Sr.'s face filled the screen, gaunt but fierce. The timestamp showed it was recorded the night of the party, just hours after the servant comment. "My dearest Sarah," Marcus began, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "If you're watching this, then Derek has done what I feared he would. I'm recording this while the evidence is fresh, while my mind is clear, to set the record straight." Sarah glanced up at Rachel, who was watching the parking lot like a sentinel. Marcus continued, "Tonight, my son revealed his true nature. But more importantly, you revealed yours. Grace under fire, dignity in the face of humiliation. The qualities that built the Hamilton empire now completely absent in my adopted son." Adopted. Even on video, the word carried weight. What Derek doesn't know, what I've kept hidden for 40 years, is that the Hamilton Family Trust has very specific provisions. Provisions his lawyers clearly never examined closely. A ghost of a smile crossed Marcus's weathered features. The company can only be inherited by blood relations. It's an archaic clause, one I'd planned to change. Until tonight. Sarah's mind raced. If Derek wasn't a blood Hamilton, your children, Sarah, are my only legitimate heirs. And you, as their guardian, control their interests until they come of age. Marcus leaned forward. But there's more. Derek's been embezzling. Victoria Cross isn't just his mistress. She's his partner in a cryptocurrency scheme that's drained $30 million from Hamilton Tech's development fund. Rachel gasped. "Mom, there's more. Alex found—" "Shh." Sarah nodded toward the door where a familiar figure had just entered. Victoria Cross, 7 months pregnant and dressed in designer maternity wear, scanning the coffee shop. "Hide," Sarah whispered urgently. Rachel slipped toward the bathroom as Sarah turned her body to shield Thomas, but Victoria had already spotted her. She approached with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences, her heels clicking on the worn floor. "Sarah, what a surprise." Her eyes fixed on Thomas with calculating interest. "He looks well, considering." "We're fine." "Are you?" Victoria slid uninvited into Rachel's vacated seat. "Because Derek's been worried. A baby with special needs, a mother with limited resources. He's prepared to be generous." The answer is still no. Victoria's perfectly painted lips curved. "You haven't heard the new offer. Full medical care for Thomas, a trust fund. All you have to do is sign a simple DNA acknowledgement." Sarah's blood chilled. Acknowledging Derek as the father? Who else could it be? Your doctor friend disappeared rather conveniently. Victoria leaned forward. "Think about it, Sarah. Your son gets the Hamilton name legitimately. Medical care, education, all the things you can't provide from your—" She glanced around with barely concealed disgust. "Current circumstances. In exchange for what? Drop the custody appeals. Stop the blog posts about financial abuse." Victoria's mask slipped, showing the steel beneath. "Disappear quietly and Thomas gets everything. Fight us and we'll prove he's not a Hamilton at all. Just the bastard of a disgraced woman's affair." Thomas stirred against Sarah's chest, making the soft sounds that preceded crying. She stood, gathering the diaper bag with practiced efficiency. "My answer remains no." "You're making a mistake." Victoria's voice hardened. "Derek's patience isn't infinite, and accidents happen to babies with breathing problems. Sid's is so tragic, so unpredictable. Are you threatening my son?" Sarah's voice carried across the coffee shop, causing heads to turn. Victoria stood, smoothing her dress over her bump. "I'm offering friendly advice. Take the deal, Sarah, for you lose everything, again." She left in a cloud of expensive perfume and implied violence. Sarah's hands shook as she adjusted Thomas's carrier, the baby now crying in earnest. Rachel emerged from hiding, her face pale but determined. "Mom, she just threatened Thomas. We have to be smart." Sarah found a burp cloth, soothing the baby with the efficiency of months of practice. "Tell me what Alex found." Rachel pulled out a different phone, Alex's, Sarah realized. He's been documenting everything. Screenshots of Dad's texts with Victoria about the money transfers. Photos of documents Dad thought he shredded. And Mom, she swiped to a specific image. "The vasectomy records are fake. Dad never had one." Sarah stared at the medical document. Then Victoria's baby could actually be his, But more importantly, Alex found emails between Dad and Judge Stone. She didn't just take bribes. She's been having an affair with Dad's lawyer, Marcus Thorne. There are pictures, explicit ones. The pieces clicked into place. Derek's confidence. The judge's predetermined rulings. The entire system rigged from the start. Where is this evidence? Hidden in my TikTok drafts. Thousands of video that look like normal teenage stuff, but the metadata contains everything. Rachel's smile was sharp as her father's had once been, but with her mother's purpose. I've been building our case for months. So has Alex. How do I access it? You don't. We do. Rachel squared her shoulders. There's going to be another custody hearing next month, right? For permanent orders? Sarah nodded, dread pooling in her stomach. Good. Alex and I are going to testify. Really testify this time. No coaching, no preparation from Dad. Rachel's eyes blazed. We're done watching him destroy our family. Grandpa's dying, Mom. He might not make it to Christmas. We won't let Derek steal his legacy too. Baby, if you do this, your father will… What? Ship me to Switzerland again? Take away my car? Ground me? Rachel laughed bitterly. I'm 17. Alex is almost 20. We're not little kids he can manipulate anymore. Thomas had settled, his breathing even against Sarah's chest. 3 children, 3 fighters. Maybe Derek had miscalculated after all. There's something else, Rachel said, pulling up a final video. This is from last night. The screen showed Derek's home office. Victoria's voice slurred with wine. When are you going to tell them the truth? That you knew Marcus was never your real father? That you've been planning this since you found out about the adoption when you were 15? Derek's response was cold. After the old man dies and I've secured everything, then Sarah and her brats can learn how worthless they really are. Our brats, Victoria corrected. Don't forget I'm carrying your child too. Your child, not mine. I told you to get rid of it. The sound of breaking glass, Victoria's shriek of rage, then nothing. She sent it to me by mistake, Rachel explained. Meant to send it to her lawyer, I think. But Mom, he admitted it, all of it. Sarah stared at her daughter, this brave, brilliant girl who'd inherited the best of both her parents. You know what this means? If you testify, if you share this evidence… War, Rachel finished. We know. Alex and I talked about it. We're ready. As if summoned by his name, Alex appeared in the coffee shop doorway. Taller, broader, but with the same determined expression as his sister. He crossed to their table without hesitation, wrapping Sarah in a careful hug that included Thomas. Mom, he said simply, we're getting you back. All of us. Grandpa made us promise. Sarah held her children, all 3 of them, and felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year. Not hope, something better. Certainty. The rebellion had begun. December arrived with unusual cold, frost coating the windows of Sarah's Oakland apartment. Thomas, now 8 months old, had developed a respiratory infection that had him back on oxygen. Sarah hadn't slept in 3 days, alternating between his treatments and preparing for the custody hearing that would determine everything. Breathe, baby, she whispered, holding the nebulizer mask to his tiny face. Just keep breathing. Her phone lit up with a text from Patricia Stone. Marcus in hospice, asking for you. Sarah's heart clenched. She'd known this was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. Marcus had been her lighthouse in the storm. Losing him now, just when the children were ready to fight, a knock at the door made her freeze. Process servers didn't usually come at night. Sarah, it's Maya Williams. Sarah recognized the voice. Her old friend, the investigative journalist Derek, had gotten fired. She opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain on. Maya looked different, harder. The soft edges of privilege had been carved away, leaving someone who understood survival. I'm sorry to show up like this, Maya said quickly, but there's something you need to know. Derek's moving to have you declared mentally incompetent. Tomorrow, emergency hearing, sealed courtroom. Patricia doesn't even know yet. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. How do you… I've been investigating him. Off the books, funded by some of your blog followers who reached out. Maya held up a flash drive. Everything's on here. But Sarah, there's more. Marcus doesn't have weeks, he has hours. And Derek's already at the hospice with papers. Papers? Power of attorney, end-of-life directives. If Marcus signs them, Derek gets everything immediately. No waiting for probate. Sarah looked at Thomas, struggling to breathe in his bouncy chair. Then at Maya, who'd risked everything to warn her. Can you watch him, just for an hour? His medications are... I know, I've been reading your blog. Maya stepped inside, already moving toward the baby. Go, I've got him. Sarah grabbed her keys and ran. The hospice was 40 minutes away in good traffic. She made it in 25, running red lights and praying no cops would stop her. The Hamilton name might be mud, but it still opened doors. The night nurse recognized her, waving her through despite visiting hours being long over. Marcus's room was crowded. Derek stood by the bed with a notary. Victoria sat in the corner, her pregnancy enormous now. Two lawyers Sarah didn't recognize flanked them. And Marcus? God, Marcus. The strong man who'd built an empire was reduced to skin and rattling breath, barely conscious. You can't be here, Derek said coldly. There's a restraining order, which doesn't apply to medical facilities during family emergencies. Sarah moved to Marcus's other side, taking his paper-thin hand. Marcus? It's Sarah. I'm here. His eyes fluttered open, focusing with effort. Sarah. The word was barely a whisper. My dear girl. Don't sign anything, she said urgently. Please. The children need stability, Derek interrupted, which their mother can't provide. Dad, if you'll just sign here. No, Marcus's voice was weak but clear. Want witnesses, real witnesses, not your people. Derek's face flushed. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. The cancer, the medications, get out. 2 words, but they carried 40 years of authority. Even diminished, Marcus Hamilton could command a room. You're making a mistake, Victoria said, standing awkwardly. When he's gone, you'll have nothing. No protection, no access to the children. Nothing. She has everything, Marcus wheezed. Show them, Sarah. Sarah pulled out her phone, finding the video Rachel had given her. Marcus's confession, the evidence of Derek's embezzlement, the truth about the Hamilton legacy. Derek went white. That's fake. Deep faked, like you claimed my evidence was. Forensics, already done, Marcus managed. By my people, not yours. The lawyers exchanged glances. One cleared his throat. Mr. Hamilton, if there's evidence of financial malfeasance, get out, Derek roared. All of you, this is family business. But the damage was done. The lawyers were already backing toward the door, calculating their exposure. The notary packed up without a word. Only Victoria remained, her face twisted with rage. You stupid old man. You could have just died quietly. Now we'll have to... Careful, Sarah said softly. Threats against a dying man in front of witnesses? That's criminal. Victoria's mouth snapped shut. She grabbed Derek's arm. We're leaving, now. After they left, Sarah sat with Marcus in the sudden quiet. His breathing was labored, each inhale a mountain climbed. The letter, he whispered. Rachel has it. For the hearing, everything. Elena would be proud. Save your strength, Sarah begged. The children need you. I need you. You have everything you need. Always did. Just had to find it. His grip tightened fractionally. Promise me. Grace, over revenge. I promise. He smiled then, the ghost of the man who'd built empires and loved deeply. Tell Thomas about me. Tell them all. Sarah held his hand as his breathing slowed. She talked about the children, about Thomas's first smile, about Rachel's courage and Alex's determination. She talked until the monitors flatlined and the nurses came with their professional sympathy. Marcus Hamilton died at 11:47 p.m. on December 15th, holding the hand of his true daughter-in-law. Sarah drove home in a daze, tears blurring the taillights ahead of her. At every stoplight, she checked her phone, expecting Derek's retaliation. It came as she pulled into her building's parking lot. Emergency custody order, signed by Judge Patricia Stone. Based on credible reports of mental instability and child endangerment, all 3 Hamilton children were to be removed from Sarah's care immediately, including Thomas. Sarah ran up the stairs, her heart hammering. The door to her apartment stood open. Maya, she called, terrorizing. Thomas? The apartment was empty. Overturned furniture showed signs of struggle. Thomas's medications were scattered across the floor. His favorite blanket, the one that smelled like her, lay abandoned by his crib. On the kitchen counter, a note in Maya's handwriting. They had badges. I couldn't stop them. I'm so sorry. Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed on the floor of her baby's nursery, surrounded by the remnants of their life together. They'd taken him, taken her sick baby in the middle of the night while Marcus died, and she held his hand. The phone rang. Victoria. Missing something? Her voice dripped satisfaction. Don't worry, Thomas is safe. Well, as safe as any baby in foster care can be. Did you know the system is overwhelmed? Sometimes infants get lost for weeks, months even. Where is he? Sarah's voice was raw. Victoria, please. He needs his medications. His breathing. Should have thought of that before you played your little video. Derek's filing criminal charges. Extortion, harassment, elder abuse. You clearly manipulated a dying man. Victoria laughed. By the time you get out of jail, if you get out, Thomas won't even remember you. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the ruins of her life, her baby stolen, her protector dead, her older children about to testify in a rigged court. Rock Bottom had a basement, and she just discovered it. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your blog. Now a friend. Sarah opened her blog app with numb fingers. A new post had been published, one she hadn't written. The Servant's Story, a Hamilton Empire Exposed. The post contained everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence Rachel and Alex had gathered. Screenshots of Derek's affairs, Victoria's cryptocurrency fraud, Judge Stone's bribes, the fake vasectomy records. Even security footage from the night of the party showing Sarah's fall and Derek's indifference. The view counter was spinning like a slot machine. 50,000, 100,000, 500,000. The comments exploded. Is this real? OMG, the judge is corrupt. Those poor children. Where is Thomas? Within an hour, where is Thomas was trending globally. Major news outlets picked up the story. The security footage of Sarah bleeding on marble while Derek stayed with his mistress went viral on TikTok, shared by millions of outraged viewers. Sarah's phone rang. Patricia Stone. Sarah, whatever you did, I didn't. Doesn't matter. The FBI just raided Judge Stone's home. The state attorney general is opening an investigation. And Sarah, someone leaked Thomas's foster placement to Twitter. There are 1,000 people heading to that facility demanding his return. Sarah stood on shaking legs. The apartment was still destroyed. Her baby was still gone. But something had shifted in the universe. Her phone lit up with another text, this time from Rachel. The rebellion isn't over, Mom. It's just beginning. Go get our brother. We'll handle Dad. In the distance, sirens wailed, coming closer. Sarah Hamilton had lost everything, but sometimes in the darkest hour, that's when the dawn begins to break. The courthouse steps were packed with people holding signs, Justice for Sarah, Where is Thomas? Corrupt Judge Stone. News vans lined the street like modern siege weapons. The story had exploded across social media overnight, 2 billion views and counting. Sarah stood at the bottom of the steps in her only remaining suit, Patricia Stone beside her. They'd gotten Thomas back after 1,000 protesters surrounded the foster facility, live streaming until authorities had no choice but to return him. He was safe with Maya now, his breathing stable, but Sarah's heart remained in her throat. You ready for this? Patricia asked. No. Sarah looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the justice system that had failed her systematically. But my children are in there, so I'm going. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Judge Stone's replacement, an emergency appointment named Judge Rodriguez, looked overwhelmed. Derek sat at his table looking haggard, his perfect image finally cracking. Victoria was notably absent, but it was Rachel and Alex who drew Sarah's focus. Her children sat in the witness section, both dressed professionally. Rachel held a tablet. Alex had a laptop. Modern warriors with digital weapons. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Rodriguez, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and steel in her voice, took her seat. Before we begin, I want to address the elephant in the room. This court is aware of the social media attention this case has received. However, we will proceed based on law and evidence, not public opinion. Is that clear? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gallery. Now then, this is a hearing to determine permanent custody arrangements for the minor children, Rachel and Alexander Hamilton, as well as addressing the emergency removal of Thomas Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, you may proceed. Derek's new lawyer, Marcus Thorne, having been arrested alongside Judge Stone, stood nervously. Your Honor, we move to postpone pending the criminal investigations. Denied. The children's welfare can't wait for criminal proceedings. Continue. The lawyer shuffled papers. We maintain that Mrs. Hamilton presents a danger to the children's well-being. Objection. Patricia stood. Your Honor, given recent revelations about evidence tampering and judicial corruption in this case, we move to have all previous testimony and evidence thrown out. I'm inclined to agree, Judge Rodriguez said. This court has reviewed the files. The irregularities are substantial. We'll be starting fresh. Ms. Hamilton, would you like to make an opening statement? Sarah stood, her legs surprisingly steady. But before she could speak, Rachel rose in the witness section. Your Honor, may I address the court? Judge Rodriguez looked surprised. Young lady, you'll have your chance to testify. With respect, Your Honor, I'm 17 years old. I've watched my family destroyed by lies and corruption. I've been shipped to Switzerland, manipulated, and used as a pawn. Rachel's voice carried the same authority her grandfather's once had. I'm done waiting for my chance. We're done waiting. She held up her tablet. May I approach? The judge nodded slowly. Rachel walked forward with the confidence of someone who'd found her purpose. Your Honor, what I'm about to show you is a live stream with 5 million viewers waiting. They've been following our story. They've seen the evidence my brother and I collected. They've watched our mother fight a rigged system with grace and dignity, while our father, she glanced at Derek with contempt, systematically destroyed her. Young lady, this court doesn't conduct proceedings via social media. This court failed us, Alex interrupted, standing beside his sister. Every institution that was supposed to protect us failed. So we're protecting ourselves, Your Honor. We're not asking permission. We're informing you that in 30 seconds, we're going live with everything. Derek shot to his feet. Your Honor, they can't. Sit down, Mr. Hamilton. Judge Rodriguez's voice was sharp. Rachel, Alex, while I understand your frustration, there are proper channels. Proper channels gave custody to a man who left our pregnant mother bleeding on the floor, Rachel said. Proper channels took our baby brother from his crib. Proper channels were bought and paid for. She pressed something on her tablet. We're live. The courtroom erupted. The bailiff moved forward, but Judge Rodriguez held up a hand, watching with shrewd eyes as Rachel faced the camera. I'm Rachel Hamilton, she said clearly. I'm 17 years old, and I'm here to tell the truth about what Derek Hamilton did to our family. What followed was 20 minutes of devastating testimony. Rachel and Alex took turns, seamlessly presenting evidence on screen for the live stream audience. The edited therapy sessions, the bribes, the affairs. But most powerfully, they showed videos they'd taken secretly over months. Derek screaming at Sarah while she was pregnant. Victoria openly discussing getting rid of Sarah. The night Sarah called, terrified and alone, after giving birth in a motel bathroom while Derek partied with his mistress. This is our father, Alex said to the camera, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. This is who the court gave us to. While our mother, who never stopped fighting for us, who lived in her car to stay close to our brother, was painted as the villain. The live stream comments scrolled too fast to read. The view count hit 10 million, 20, 50. Your Honor, Rachel turned back to the judge. We're almost adults. We've made our choice. We choose our mother. We choose our brother. We choose the parent who chose us, even when it cost her everything. And if this court rules against us again, Alex added, everyone watching will know why. No more secrets, no more lies, just truth. Judge Rodriguez sat in stunned silence. The courtroom held its breath. Derek had shrunk in his chair, his face ashen as he watched his children destroy him more thoroughly than any prosecutor could. "Mr. Hamilton," the judge finally spoke, "would you like to respond to your children's testimony?" Derek's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Derek pushed him away. He stood slowly, looking at his children, really looking at them, for perhaps the first time in years. He stopped, swallowed. "I want what's best for my children." "Do you?" Rachel's voice cut like glass. "Then tell the truth. For once in your life, Dad, tell the truth." Derek's composure finally cracked. "I was angry at your mother for being everything I wasn't, for being real when I was just playing a role." He looked at Sarah then, something broken in his eyes. "I wanted to hurt you, punish you for making me feel like a fraud in my own life. And his voice broke. "I destroyed everything that mattered, trying to prove I mattered more." The admission hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Victoria chose that moment to enter the courtroom, her pregnancy enormous, her face twisted with rage. "You pathetic fool," she spat at Derek. "You're going to let them—" "Sit down, Ms. Cross," Judge Rodriguez commanded, "or be removed." "This is a farce." "That woman," she pointed at Sarah, "seduced a sick old man, stole my child's birthright." "Your child," Rachel said clearly, "isn't a Hamilton. Neither is our father. Grandpa Marcus told us everything. The adoption, the bylaws, the truth Dad's been running from his whole life." Derek crumpled then, completely. The man who'd orchestrated such careful destruction was undone by the simple truth from his daughter's lips. Judge Rodriguez had seen enough. "I'm prepared to rule. Based on the evidence presented, and I use that term loosely given the circus this has become, I find that the previous custody arrangements were obtained through fraud and corruption." She looked directly at Sarah. "Mrs. Hamilton, I'm granting you full physical and legal custody of all 3 children, effective immediately. Mr. Hamilton, you'll have supervised visitation pending completion of therapy and parenting classes. Furthermore," she continued, "given the evidence of criminal conspiracy, I'm referring this entire matter to the Attorney General for prosecution. This court is appalled by what has been revealed today." The gavel fell with finality. The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Victoria screamed obscenities until bailiffs removed her. But Sarah only had eyes for her children as they flew into her arms. "We did it, Mom," Rachel whispered. "We got you back." "No, baby." Sarah held them tight, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me. You saved us all." Derek remained seated, staring at nothing. His carefully constructed world lay in ruins around him. As security led him away, the FBI had been waiting outside. He looked back once. "I'm sorry," he mouthed to Sarah. 2 words, years too late. Sarah nodded, remembering Marcus's last wish. Grace over revenge. "I know," she mouthed back. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in cheers. Thomas waited in Maya's arms, reaching for his mother with chubby hands. Sarah took him, surrounded by all 3 of her children, and faced the sea of cameras. "Mrs. Hamilton, how does it feel to win?" Sarah looked at her family, broken but healing, scarred but whole. "This isn't winning," she said clearly. "This is surviving. Winning will be raising these 3 incredible humans to be better than what they've seen, to choose grace over cruelty, truth over power, love over fear." She turned away from the cameras then, walking down the courthouse steps with her children. Behind them, an empire built on lies crumbled. Before them, something new and honest waited to be built. The live stream ended with 100 million views. But Sarah Hamilton's real story was just beginning. 6 months later, Brisha had come to Marin County. The Hamilton Estate Gardens bloomed with the same roses Elena Hamilton had planted 40 years ago. Sarah stood on the terrace where this journey had begun, but everything else had changed. Thomas toddled across the lawn, finally healthy enough to explore his inheritance. Rachel, about to graduate high school with honors, sat editing her latest video. She'd become an advocate for family court reform with millions of followers. Alex was home from Stanford for the ceremony, his first year completed despite everything. "Mrs. Hamilton?" Maria, the estate manager, appeared with a gentle smile. She'd stayed through everything, maintaining the house even during the chaos. "The guests are arriving." It wasn't a party this time. It was something more solemn, more meaningful. a gathering to honor Marcus Hamilton's legacy and officially transfer the estate to its rightful owner. Sarah had spent months in legal proceedings. Derek's crimes had been extensive: embezzlement, fraud, bribery. He'd accepted a plea deal, 5 years minimum security in exchange for full cooperation. The cryptocurrency scheme with Victoria had stolen $30 million from Hamilton Tech. Judge Stone and Marcus Thorne faced their own trials. But today wasn't about justice. It was about healing. Sarah, Walter Davies, Marcus's faithful lawyer, approached with documents. It's time. The library where Marcus had spent his final years had been transformed, not with decorations, but with purpose. Sarah had donated his rare books to the public library, keeping only the photo albums and personal memoirs. The space now housed computers and resources for women escaping financial abuse. The first Hamilton Family Justice Center. The small gathering included Sarah's parents, finally free to support their daughter without legal threats. Maya Williams, whose investigative work had helped crack the case. Dr. Morrison and Dr. Wright, cleared of all false accusations. Even some of Sarah's blog followers had come. Women whose own stories of survival had given her strength. One person stood apart from the others. Victoria Cross, no longer pregnant, wore simple clothes instead of designer labels. Her son, Derek's son, DNA had confirmed, was in foster care while she served weekends in county jail for fraud. Sarah had invited her. Grace over revenge. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said quietly when Victoria approached. "I don't understand why you invited me." Victoria's voice lacked its former sharp edges. "I destroyed your life." "You tried," Sarah corrected gently. "But you were a victim too, in your way. Derek used us both." Victoria's composure cracked. "I grew up with nothing. I thought if I could just take what you had. But it was never about the money, was it? It was about family, real family." "It always is," Sarah touched her arm. "Your son needs his mother. When you're 80, when you've done the work, there's a place here for both of you. Not in the main house, boundaries matter, but the guest house stands empty." Victoria stared, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Wait, because Marcus taught me that legacy isn't about blood or birthrights. It's about choices. I'm choosing to break the cycle." Walter Davies cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could begin." They gathered in a circle, an unconventional ceremony for an unconventional family. Walter read from Marcus's final instructions, his voice carrying the weight of history. "I, Marcus Hamilton, being of sound mind if not body, do hereby transfer full ownership of the Hamilton estate to Sarah Morgan Hamilton. Not as inheritance, but as recognition. She honored this home when my son dishonored it. She protected this family when I could not. She is the true heir to Eleanor's legacy of grace." Sarah signed where indicated, her hand steady. But Walter wasn't finished. "There's one more document," he said, producing a sealed envelope. Marcus asked that this be read after the transfer was complete. Yet Sarah broke the seal with trembling fingers and read aloud. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then you've survived the storm. I knew you would. Eleanor knew it too. She visited me in dreams those final nights, and she was so proud of the daughter she never got to meet. I have one last secret to share. The Hamilton fortune was never just about technology or innovation. Eleanor and I built it together, and when she died, I locked away the best part of what we created. In the rose garden, beneath the statue of Athena that Eleanor loved, you'll find a safety deposit box key. What's inside belongs to you, not as my daughter-in-law, but as the woman who showed me what I'd forgotten. That wealth means nothing without wisdom, and power is empty without purpose. Use it to build something better than what I built. Something true. With all my love and respect, Marcus, Dad." The garden was a short walk away. The group followed as Sarah knelt beside the statue, her fingers finding the small metal box hidden beneath decades of rose roots. Inside, a single key. "The Bank of Marin," Walter said, recognizing the number. "I can take you to tomorrow," Sarah decided. "Today day is for family." As the sun set over the estate, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Sarah stood where she'd stood that terrible night. But instead of champagne and pretense, the gardens now held laughter. Real laughter. Thomas chased Bubbles, Rachel blue, while Alex filmed, already planning a documentary about their journey. Sarah's parents sat with Maya, sharing stories. Even Victoria lingered at the edges, watching what family could look like when built on truth instead of lies. Mom, Rachel appeared at her elbow. Someone's at the gate. Says he has an appointment? Sarah frowned. She hadn't scheduled anything else. But when she saw the figure walking up the drive, her breath caught. Derek. He looked different. Prison had aged him, but something else had changed too. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something Sarah had never seen in 12 years of marriage. Humility. I'm not supposed to be here, he said quickly, stopping well short of the restraining order distance. But my lawyer got special permission. 5 minutes. I have something to give you. Derek, please. He held up a manila envelope. Just, please. Sarah nodded to Alex, who jogged down to retrieve the envelope. Inside was a single document. Full termination of parental rights, Derek explained. For Thomas. He was never mine, we both know that. But this makes it legal. He's yours, completely. No claims, no interference, no future custody battles. Sarah stared at the paper. Why? Because it's right. Because for once in my life, I want to do what's right. Derek's voice broke. I've been in therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind you edit for court. And I've had to face what I became. What I did, I can't undo it, but I can stop causing harm. He looked past her to where Rachel and Alex stood protectively. I'm sorry. I know it's not enough. I know it never will be. But I'm sorry. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah holding the document that severed his last legal claim to her life. You okay, Mom? Alex asked. Sarah looked at her children, all three of them safe, whole hers. She thought of Marcus's letter, of Eleanor's roses, of grace over revenge. Yes, she said, and meant it. I'm okay. That night, after everyone had gone and the children slept in their own beds for the first time in over a year, Sarah sat in Marcus's study. Her study now. She opened her laptop and began to type. Dear Warriors, tonight I write to you from a place I never thought I'd see again. Not because I won a battle, but because I survived a war. Many of you have followed this journey, have sent support and love when I had nothing else. Now I have something to give back. The Hamilton Family Justice Center opens next month. Free legal aid for women escaping financial abuse. Emergency housing for families in crisis. Resources, support, and most importantly, hope. Because that's what you gave me, Warriors, hope. The servant became the owner not through conquest, but through constancy. Not through revenge, but through resilience. The mansion is just walls and memories. But what we build inside those walls, that's the real inheritance. Thank you for walking this path with me. Until next time, Sarah CEO, Hamilton Family Foundation, Mother, Survivor, Warrior. She hit publish and closed the laptop. Tomorrow she'd discover what Marcus had left in that safety deposit box. Tomorrow she'd begin the work of turning an empire built on ego into something built on empathy. But tonight, she walked through the home that was finally, truly hers. She checked on each sleeping child, adjusting blankets and whispering love. She stood on the terrace where it all began and let the night air wash over her. Behind her, the portrait of Eleanor Hamilton seemed to smile in the moonlight. Two women separated by decades, united by strength. Sarah Hamilton had been called a servant in this very spot. Now she was the master of her fate, the owner of her story, the architect of her future. The deed was done, the servant's tale complete, but the warrior's work had just begun. 2 years later, the Hamilton estate rang with laughter as 500 women gathered for the second annual Phoenix Rising Conference. The grand ballroom where Sarah had once been humiliated now hosted survivors sharing their stories, lawyers offering pro bono consultations, and financial advisors teaching independence. Sarah stood at the podium, no longer the frightened woman who'd collapsed on marble floors. Her hair showed silver streaks she didn't bother to hide. Her confidence came not from designer clothes, but from battles won and purpose found. 2 years ago, I was called a servant in this room, she began, her voice carrying to every corner. Today, we are all servants to justice, to each other, to the belief that no woman should face financial abuse alone. The audience, her warriors made real, applauded. Among them sat surprising faces. Maya Williams, now running the Foundation's media division. Dr. Morrison, who'd started a clinic for women without insurance. Even Victoria Cross, who'd become an advocate for reforming custody laws after fighting her own battles. In the front row, Sarah's children watched with pride. Rachel, now at Berkeley studying law, Alex, who'd switched majors to social work, and Thomas, a thriving 3-year-old who believed the mansion was a magical castle where hurt people came to heal. He wasn't wrong. The Hamilton Family Foundation has helped 1,200 women escape financial abuse, Sarah continued. We've provided emergency housing to 300 families. We've funded 50 custody battles against corrupt systems, and we're just getting started. More applause, but Sarah held up her hand. Today, I want to announce something new, something Marcus Hamilton dreamed of but never saw realized. She clicked a remote. The screen behind her showed architectural plans. The Eleanor Hamilton Center for Economic Justice, a 100-unit transitional housing facility with on-site childcare, job training, and legal services. Built on land Derek tried to develop into luxury condos, built with the fortune hidden in a safety deposit box by a man who understood that wealth means nothing if it doesn't serve others. The room erupted. Sarah smiled, remembering the moment she'd opened that box. Not gold or stocks or bonds. Patents, hundreds of them, in Eleanor Hamilton's name. Innovations she'd developed but never claimed credit for. Worth billions in today's market. Marcus's final gift. The proof that behind every great man was a woman whose greatness went unrecognized. Until now. But I can't do this alone, Sarah said as the room quieted. We need partners, volunteers, warriors willing to... We're in, Gran. The voice came from the back of the room. Sarah shaded her eyes against the lights, then froze. Derek stood in the doorway. Not the Derek of old. That man was gone. This one wore simple clothes and carried himself without arrogance. Beside him stood other men, all wearing matching t-shirts. Fathers against financial abuse. If you'll have us, Derek continued, his voice steady despite the hostile murmurs. We've been meeting. Men who've recognized the harm we've caused, who want to make amends, who want to teach our sons better than we were taught. Sarah gripped the podium. The room held its breath. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said finally. But redemption requires action. You'll work under Victoria's supervision in our perpetrator rehabilitation program. You'll share your stories to help other women recognize the signs. You'll face the people you've hurt and own your choices. We're ready, Derek said simply, then welcome to the work. It wasn't forgiveness. That was each woman's choice to make or withhold. But it was progress. It was the radical possibility that people could change, systems could be reformed, cycles could be broken. After the conference, Sarah walked through the gardens with her children. The roses bloomed as they had for 40 years, witnesses to pain and progress alike. You think he means it? Rachel asked, watching Derek help load donation boxes with other volunteers. I think he wants to, Sarah replied. That's a start. Mom, Alex said suddenly. Look, he pointed to the fountain where Thomas played. But it wasn't her youngest that caught her eye. It was the elderly woman sitting on the bench beside it, feeding the birds. Sarah's heart stopped. The woman looked exactly like the portraits in Marcus's study, but that was impossible. Eleanor Hamilton had died 30 years ago. The woman looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes across the garden. She smiled, a smile Sarah had seen in dreams and photographs, and nodded once. Then she scattered the last of her bird seed and walked toward the rose bushes, disappearing behind them like morning mist. Mom? Rachel touched her arm. You okay? Sarah blinked. The bench sat empty, but on it lay a single white rose, the kind Eleanor had cultivated, extinct for decades. Yes, Sarah whispered, understanding flooding through here. Everything's exactly as it should be. That night, Sarah stood on the terrace one last time. The estate stretched before her, no longer a monument to old power, but a beacon of new possibility. In every window, light shone, survivors finding safety, children learning hope, warriors discovering strength. Her phone buzzed. A message from a follower. Thank you for showing us that servants can become queens, but queens serve others. You saved my life. Sarah smiled, typing back, you saved yourself. I just held the light. The Hamilton legacy lived on. Not in blood or birthrights, but in every woman who refused to be broken. in every child who grew up knowing their worth, in every person who chose grace over revenge, service over power, love over fear. The servant had become the owner. But more importantly, she'd become herself. And that was the greatest inheritance of all.